held our breath. The clock struck midnight, and the world didn't end. The millennium bug didn't ravage our technological systems, nor did it send us back to a dark age without the comfort of our precious Tamagotchis. The people rejoiced, for we still lived in a world with answering machines, Yahoo, and most importantly, being able to write 5,318,008 on our calculators. Soon, mankind will be blessed by the arrival of the PlayStation 2, with the Xbox and GameCube hot on its heels. Although the coming years will be known as the Bronze Age of video gaming, the year 2000 boasted beloved titles such as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, Pokemon Crystal, and The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. All over the world, gamers could chain those rapid pop shove-its and kick flip-its, if you'll pardon my language, as well as earn the respect of the legendary Suicune and stop the moon from crashing into Termina. It was a great year to be a gamer. Sort of, because somewhere out there, some poor boy or girl ended up playing one of these games instead. Let's mourn their choices together, shall we? As we've done for 2019 and 2020, it's time to take a trip to the very bottom of the Metacritic rankings to find the worst rated games of the year with 7 or more critical reviews. So, ice up those frosted tips and whip on some Ricky Martin, because we're taking a pimpin' trip back to Y2K. I'm Peter from TripleJump, I'm living La Vida Loca, and here are the 10 worst reviewed games of 2000. Number 10, ATV Quad Power Racing. PlayStation, 42%. It's easy to wax lyrical about a great game. Heck, there's even a lot to be said about awful titles. How else do you explain our ability to natter on for half an hour at a time about the games we feature on Worst Games Ever?
That was obvious. I've already walked past that and nothing happened. Oh my god, that man.
Then there are those bland, wishy-washy games that fail to spark any form of creative discussion. ATV Quad Power Racing is a prime example of how meh a full-throttle off-road pursuit between diesel-guzzling machines can really be. From simplistic controls to a difficulty level that verges on rendering the player comatose through absolute boredom, this quad racer struggled to limp over the finish line for both critics and audiences alike. Even for those involved in the IRL racing circuit, it offered little engagement. Besides, with the likes of Colin McRae Rally 2.0 releasing in the same year and earning a solid 90% rating, it's hard to justify investing any time at all in this snooze fest. Suffice it to say, you'd be better off playing Snake on your old Nokia. You know, the one that's still at the back of your desk drawer, still working, full battery, a universal constant, undying, eternal. Number 9, Rally Challenge 2000. Nintendo 64, 41%. Oh, buckle up, my dudes, because it's going to be a lackluster ride. With nearly the same Metacritic score as ATV Quad Power Racing, Rally Challenge 2000 does very little to get your adrenaline pumping. It's a downright lukewarm experience that fails to convey any sense of thrill or excitement. For instance, the player is unbelievably limited by the width of the track itself. Think of bowling with the barriers up. There's no shame in it, and I will not have you telling me otherwise, but now think of bowling with the barriers up on a lane that's 2 feet wide. Not exactly exhilarating, is it? You can't spin out or lose control either, so forget about attempting those risky maneuvers to create any semblance of rousing gameplay. Even the visuals are downright soupy, with a hazy draw distance and perpetual fogginess that would put Silent Hill to shame. The developers even had the nerve to add motion blur. There's just not a lot to be said about this disappointing title. It doesn't provide anything new, and yet still delivers poorly on what it actually does offer. I mean, for goodness sake, even Action Bass scored higher than this tripe, and my disappointment with Action Bass is legendary. Number 8, Timeline, PC, 41%. Eidos Interactive capriciously boasted that via their masterpiece of a game, the player would find themselves immersed, quote, in a diversive and realistic environment, all modelled with historical accuracy. Oh, sorry, I just can't finish reading that sentence. Eidos intended for this challenging and interactive world to wow players and critics alike with innovative facial animations and a gripping commitment to historical precision. Instead, most players were relieved that they could breeze through the entire thing in about 3.5 hours. While some praised the music, others lambasted the repetitive arcade sequences, lack of excitement, imprecise control system, and utter inability to enthrall the player with the sense of wonder that science fiction can usually achieve. That's right, it's not just some historical sim, as you might expect from Eidos' fanciful description, it's a puzzle-adventure title based on Michael Crichton's 1999 sci-fi novel of the same name. As per Crichton's vision, it was designed as a game easy enough for newcomers, yet challenging enough for experienced players. At odds with Crichton's vision, though, it didn't actually appeal to anyone. I'm gonna go play Billy and the Clonosaurus. Number 7. Freedom, First Resistance. PC, 40%. It's quite a feat to make alien invasions seem tedious, but congratulations, Red Storm Entertainment, you did it! This is another sci-fi novel being butchered into a shoddy excuse for an adventure game. On the chopping block this time, we have Anne McCaffrey's Catani series, which was sliced and diced into an experience that's utterly void of adventure, stakes, and momentum. Maybe some fans of McCaffrey's books enjoyed having an interactive interpretation of her work, but the majority of players could barely drag themselves through the dreary slog masquerading as an action-adventure campaign. While Freedom First Resistance takes enormous pride in its pedigree as a set of novels with actual paper and everything, it delivers little more than occasional bouts of glitchy combat, miserable dialogue, and traipsing around looking for item A to open door B. Thankfully for the sci-fi hungry fans who cryo-slept through this dull disaster, Mass Effect would land in 2007 to revitalize the storytelling capability of the genre in a way that this novel-to-video game title simply couldn't. In fact, can I just talk about Mass Effect for a bit instead? Please? No? Okay, fine. Number 6. MTV Sports Skateboarding featuring Andy McDonald. PlayStation, 40%. Let's first address the hawk in the room, shall we? Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 earned a whopping 98% average score on Metacritic during the same year that this disaster scored a mere 40%. It's safe to say that one of these things is not like the other. But quality be darned, MTV tried to cash in on the genre with seemingly the least amount of passion possible. This game is remarkably painful to play and maybe even worse to watch, so my apologies. MTV Sports Skateboarding featuring Andy McDonald is stunningly inferior to the work of Sir Tony of Hawksonton in every way, from its ugly textures and shoddy frame rate to appallingly clunky response times, and the fact that it isn't Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. The skaters seem magnetically opposed to the railings for starters, so have fun trying to stop them from bailing every single grind like the damn board's on fire. Oh, and it'll be a miracle if you can string a few moves together or even get up a gentle ramp without losing all momentum completely. It's nigh on unplayable, and seems not only like it couldn't stick the landing, but it shouldn't be able to stand up on the board in the first place. Number 5. Resident Evil Survivor. PlayStation, 39%. This game has no tall lady and is not worth discussing, but I'd still have to. While some fans were upset about Resident Evil 7's shift to a first-person perspective, as though that unforgivably slandered the third-person glory of the series, Resident Evil Survivor quietly wept alone in the corner, forgotten and unloved. And honestly, that's how it should be. This spin-off FPS arcade-style thing was as much of a monstrosity as Umbrella's most repulsive bioweapons, especially for those playing the American release, which, despite the overall design of the game, didn't actually have light gun functionality. Although this certainly impacted the reception of the uninspired installment, it wasn't the sole reason for the negative response from critics and players alike. Resi fans of the time deemed it an absolute travesty, but even those new to the franchise were still disappointed by a lack of genuine frights. Sure, some players commended it for being a bit of a laugh, but that type of response isn't what Capcom was hoping to take to the bank. It was just so not Resident Evil. Experimentation within the series has now paid off many times over, but this experiment was neither refreshing nor exciting. I mean, hell, the plot itself, protagonist with amnesia survives a helicopter crash, felt old and busted even back in Y2K. Overall, not scary enough, not polished enough, and definitely not tall enough. Number 4, ECW Anarchy Rules. Dreamcast 38%. Nothing quite says the year 2000 like adding a Z to the end of a word to make it seem cool. Oh, and dropping the E. Oh, that's some rad rebellion right there, my friend. And yet, ECW Anarchy Rules needs so much more than linguistic corruption to heave it up from the depths of absolute mediocrity. It didn't win the favour of wrestling fans, nor did it elicit much positivity from critics who mercilessly shredded the title for its tired design, ghastly graphics, and overabundance of superfluous game modes. Acclaimed Studios' previous ECW game was criticised for being too similar to an earlier WWF Attitude release, so they overcompensated by bloating this darn thing with too many match types while losing focus on the general polish and actual gameplay. In fairness, they did try to differentiate it from other wrestling titles, but they ended up doing so by making it worse than all the rest. We honestly can't put it any better than Daily Radar, who so poetically mused that Rules is an ass sandwich. We took a bite, so you don't have to. PSA, no butts were harmed in the making of this review. Number 3, Duke Nukem Land of the Babes. PlayStation, 37%. Oh boy, the Duke Nukem games sure haven't aged well, and we're not just talking about the graphics. Granted, the user reviews are exceptionally positive for this one, with many intellectuals praising the magnificence of Duke in this perfect game. Hilarious, awesome, epic fun, one quote says, and believe it or not, that's an official statement from Resident Evil's Wesker.
Ah, there you are!
Let's face it, we know how the chips are going to lie on this one. The critic and user reviews are drastically opposed, with most critics deeming it mildly entertaining at best and absolute drivel at worst. As with most Duke Nukem games, this one simply doesn't seem to be self-aware enough. It has the potential to be very satirical and clever, but it just prefers to think that it's genuinely cool. What's more, it still doesn't fully deliver on the bombastic action that it so eagerly promises. Yes, the game is ridiculous, but not really in the way that we wanted. Indeed, to fully satisfy our need for absolute explosive insanity, we had to wait another 9 years for the release of Borderlands. And yet, 3D Realms still had the absolute gall to tease Duke Nukem Forever for another 2 years after that. How dare they assume we were still waiting? Duke's here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and he seemingly has so much bubblegum he still needs to get through. Number 2, Mortal Kombat Special Forces. PlayStation, 28%. You smell that? Yeah, that's the stench of a 28% on Metacritic. Smells like mildew and lost potential. Unfortunately, most critics deemed this ugly duckling subpar as both a Mortal Kombat installment and as a standalone title. It strayed too far from MK territory without delivering the solid gameplay needed to bolster such a risky move. It also tends to sidle up to Metal Gear Solid way too closely, and that's where it trips, falls, and alerts the guards. Players found themselves skulking around a barren environment that was was alarmingly devoid of secrets, lore, and even power-ups, while developer Midway Games dangled a lackluster plot that hinged on Jax and Kano simply not liking each other. It's all a bit dull and lifeless, which isn't ideal for something trying to be a free-roaming stealth and attack espionage adventure. Combos were dialed in with lazy button mashing, enemies were indecisive, and any form of weapon handling was frustratingly awkward, if not outright game-breaking. And if that weren't enough, it's bloody ugly. Although some lighting effects are shockingly okay, the main presentation is eerily familiar to spilled porridge. It's very much gone wrong, Gromit. And number 1, HBO Boxing, PlayStation, 26%. Take all the worst aspects of a shoddy fighting game, squish them into a PS1 case, slap a sparkly HBO logo on there, and this is what you'll get. Style without the substance, flashy moves without the punching power. The sloppy gameplay of HBO Boxing boasts the ability to toggle active hands, which is just about as awful as you could imagine. The IRL razzle-dazzle of big-time bouts is replaced by background white noise, and comical thwump sounds play whenever you manage to land a hit in spite of the abysmal collision detection. Still, if you're a big fan of man punch man while men are shirtless action and want to give this title a shot for the sake of nostalgia, you might stumble across a few sparkling reviews that heralded HBO Boxing for its challenging career mode, decent character customization, and solid lineup of famous faces. These strangely favourable reviews, though, stand out like a sore thumb amongst an absolute cacophony of dire criticism and negative scores that dwell in the pitiful 20s and 30s range. Methinks the allure of Big Daddy HBO might have had some influence on the higher review scores. But TripleJump lawyers have advised me that I have no actual comment on this particular game or service, and all questions should be routed through my legal representation.
But just between you and me, the game's crap. Yeah, that's right. Sue me.